Hello everyone, welcome to Apti Plus Academy for Civil Services. So we do a daily news and editorial analysis, which I'll be covering from the Hindu and Indian Express. The most important news and editorial of the day that is relevant for both prelims and mains examination of civil services will be discussed in this session. Let's get started with the news topic list. Today is 14th of November. The first important news that is G20 summit to focus on food and energy security. Second, new regulation for awarding the PhD degree. This is the regulation coming from UGC. Third, India to unveil its long-term carbon strategy, which is again very important. Fourth, panel concern over the population criteria for acclaim schools. And the last is an editorial behind the smoke screen around the private climate finance. Apart from the news and editorial discussion, at the end of this video, there will be MCQ based question. These questions will be based on current affairs that will help you for the upcoming prelims examination. So without any further delay, let's get started. And before I begin this session, those of you who are new to our channel, do not forget to subscribe Apti Plus Academy for Civil Services on YouTube. If you like this video, if you find this video informative and helpful, do not forget to press a like button. Starting the session with the first news, that is G20 summit to focus on food and energy security. This particular news is important for General Studies paper 2 under the subtopic bilateral, regional and grouping and agreement involving India and affecting India's interest. So the Prime Minister of India is expected to lay out India's perspective on addressing the key global challenges in terms of health, post-pandemic economic recovery, energy and food security at G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. Indonesia is the current chair of G20. India will be overtaking the chairmanship of the presidency of the G20. The global challenges that has emerged due to Russia's increasing confrontation with the Ukraine has also created a debate and concern globally. The summit of the world biggest economies, which is from November 15 to 16, will have a significance for India as it will see the handing over of G20 presidency to India by Indonesia at a closing ceremony of annual gathering. So यहाँ पे कुछ important चीजें आपके लिए जानने को है. First, that Indonesia is a current presidency of G20 and India will be overtaking. If the question is asked like India ने किस country से overtake किया है G20 को, so the correct answer will be Indonesia. Now the key sessions that is there for the meeting, the G20 meeting, the Prime Minister of India will participate in 3 key sessions. The important sessions include food and energy security, digital transformation and health. Health is very important. Post-COVID, every country is of the opinion and of the notion that a preventive medicine is something that has to be built and a proper infrastructure for the healthcare amenities is essentially required. Now, the G20 leaders will deliberate and extensively on the key issues of contemporary relevance. कई ऐसे मुद्दे हैं globally जिसको एड्रेस करने की काफ़ी ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है. Even if India overtake the presidency, these basically concern will also override India. First is the state of global economy, issues related to energy, war in Ukraine, Indo-Pacific strategy, environment, agriculture, health, and digital transformation are some of the priority areas and areas in issues of contemporary relevance. The G20 leaders will discuss the challenges and underscore the importance of closer multilateral cooperations to have overcome the challenges. Now, India की presidency की अगर बात करें, India will be overtaking the G20 presidency from 1st of December 2022 this year till November 30th, 2023. So for the entire year, India will be the president, right? And as the chair of the G20, India would endeavor to provide a greater voice to the issues. वो global issues है, India के domestic issues है. This will be the right platform for India to address it, right? The global south and even state the G20 agenda in the representative in a balanced manner. So neutral approach, balanced approach is the key for India. The Prime Minister would receive the G20 presidency from the President of Indonesia at the closing summit which is there in Bali, which is also known as Bali Summit. India will also utilize this opportunity of G20 presidency in presence at the Bali Summit to invite G20 leaders to India Summit. This will be known as India's G20 Summit. Now, India's evolving G20 priorities. India specifically ने क्या-क्या priorities set की हैं? India's G20 presidency hopes to provide new strength, directions, and perspective to G20 discussions on the diverse subject, which include green development, the foremost priority of our country. Life initiative भी Prime Minister unveil की थी, that is lifestyle for the environment. There's digital transformation, inclusive and resilient growth, and women-led development. If you talk about India's G20, एक टैगलाइन या थीम डेडिकेट की गई है, दैट इज वसुदेव कुंडकम, वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर, and greater voice for the global south in the issues of international economics, cooperation, and also need to reform 21st century institutions. So these will be some of the priorities for India in the G20 presidency. If you talk about G20 members, precisely this is important for prelims specifically. Many a times UPSC tend to ask a direct question from here. So G's are the member of G7 countries: Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United States, United Kingdom, and United States. Now if you include Russia, it's become G8, or countries को मिला दे जिसमें India भी है, that become G20. Very important. It's very easy to learn. Make sure you're thorough with the G20 members. Many a times a question can be directly framed. Now, if you talk about GDP contributions की बात करें G20 की, numbers देखें, 20 members हैं total G20 में, 2/3 of world population को cater करती है, 85% of global GDP contributions है. It was founded in 1999 and 2008 में first leader meeting हुई थी. Very important facts, even if you can use in mains and many other competitive examination. Now, new regulations for awarding the PhD degree, something important for General Studies Paper 2. Under the subtopic issues related to development and management of education and human resources. So recently the University Grant Commission has made a sweeping changes in the latest regulations with regards to awarding of the PhD. Right? This is the directorate degree which is provided to the fellow students. Now the important changes abolishing the MPhil, relaxing the course work for obtaining the PhD degree, and allowing candidate to register for PhD after finishing a 4-year of graduation program. So if you have enrolled in a 4-year of a graduation program, you can directly jump into the PhD. There's no need to have a master degree, right? And have been seen as a step which will be diminishing the academic rigors which student used to have, as well as an impediment to inclusivity in the higher education. I personally feel that this is the landmark reform in the education system that India has come up in the 21st century. Now, key changes that were proposed by the University Grant Commissions. So UGC in November 2022 has notified the University Grant Commission's minimum standard and procedures for the award of PhD degree, Regulation 2022. और कुछ notable changes की अगर बात करें, one of the notable changes it was made was for the evaluation and assessment for the creations of award of degree, where it was waived the need to publish a research paper. PhD degree के लिए एक research paper mandatory होती है, जिसको कि अब mandatory नहीं रखा गया है, where a peer review journal is mandatory. Now this provision has also been exempted or removed. Now there's accompanied by the complete abolishing of MPhil, which has been a gateway for the PhD program. Until unless you do not do MPhil, you cannot enroll for the PhD. Now, in line with this recommendation, these are the policy changes that is aligned and adequately basically addressing the provisions of National Education Policy 2022. Eligibility criteria की बात करें, for the admissions to have also been revised, and a candidate can register. How a candidate can register, these are some of the provisions. You also know, I mean, it is very important for you to understand. आपको भी पता होना चाहिए कि किस तरह से PhD में enroll कर सकते हैं. After completing 1 year of or 2 semester of master degree program, you can enroll for the PhD. And if you have 4 year of program, the bachelor degree, you can enroll for the master program, right? अगर और 4 semesters और अपने अगर 2 years की भी की हैं, उसमें हो सकती है. 3-year bachelor degree program with at least 55% of the marks are equivalent grade, and you can enroll. The UGC has now allowed the part-time PhD as well, the practice that was disallowed under 2009 and 2016 regulation. So these provision has also been allowed. So these are some of the positive aspects of this rules. And even The direct question can be framed in the prelims examination with regards to the new rules and regulations. Evaluations की criteria की अगर बात करें scholars के लिए under this regulation, how the new evaluation process will work. The PhD scholar will be required to undertake the research work after completions of their coursework, make presentations and procedures for the draft dissections or thesis. The evaluations or the submissions is satisfactory, the candidate will have to defend this thesis and public viva versa. So there will be a when it is like viva test that has been there, so public viva test kind of thing will be arranged. They will have to not publish a research paper as referred as general to make a paper presentations conference or seminar before submitting this thesis. The chairman of UGC has said that while publishing a research paper or peer-to-peer review, journal जो publish की जाती है, not mandatorily required, and this is also something considered to be an unethical practice, जहाँ पे plagiarism and ever pay to publish जैसे भी approach देखे गए हैं, which is not good for our education system. So students should be motivated to train to publish the peer review journal at the present and the conference. So instead of publishing a research paper on paper which is being submitted, there will be a meeting, a conference that will be held, and where a vice versa, or you can say the direct contact for interaction will be there at the conference. Now some concern, which expert ने concern भी raise की है about the opinion that discontinue the MPhil, where it has called for the introductions of 4-year BA program and 2-year MA courses. That is for the multiple exist will hurt the social disadvantaged group who may not be able to pay for the longer duration of the courses, right? And 4-year bachelor courses की बात करें, which allows students to pursue master abroad studying for 1 year and other than the discriminated against. Now the UGC says that the move is intended to attract younger students for research. There are also concerns over diminishing scholarship and fellowship to support the PhD, as well as severe shortage of research imparting number of research supervision that is available. Now other news, that is India to unveil its long-term low carbon strategy, something important for general studies paper 3, that is conservation, environmental pollutions, degradation and EIA. Now, at the start of the second week of negotiation at the climate change conference, India is expected to unveil its long-term carbon decarbonization program. This is LTDP, right? In pursuit of its goal towards net zero emissions by 2070, which the Prime Minister has already made a commitment during the COP26 meeting, right? So under the Paris Agreement, countries are mandated to submit the long-term action plan, which is estimated for the low emissions pathway by 2050, और consistent global goal की बात की गई है जहाँ पे temperature rise will be within 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial times. Apart from this, the short-term action plan की अगर बात करें, which is also known as NDC, that is the National Determined Contributions, the countries will have to submit in dealing with the climate actions and taking 5-year or 10-year plan. India की भी अपनी intended national determined contributions हैं जिसपे इंडिया ने काफ़ी ज़्यादा प्रोग्रेस किया है. Now, what is the long-term action plan? The long-term action plan was supposed to be submitted by 2020 itself, but could not be done due to the pandemic. And most of the developed countries submitted their long-term strategy at Glasgow meeting last year. So far, 62 countries have submitted their long-term strategy, including 3 largest emitters that include China, United States, and European Union. Now, in the 4th biggest emitter of the greenhouse gas, if the contribution of the EU is considered as a bloc, and India's long-term strategy will have to deal with the key sectoral low carbon transmission pathway and the goal to have a net zero emissions by 2070. And even 5 Panchamrit was also released by India. It is expected that it will be keenly watched with the plan of the phase down and the low-based carbon generation, which is often come under the criticism from the developed countries and the climate NGOs. Basically, the point is that the developed countries is emitting on a higher side, but their contribution in the climate finance is again net. Now, long-term strategy versus NDC की अगर बात करें, the long-term strategies are different from the national determined contributions to India, like many other countries that have actually promised. NDC की अगर बात करें, it contains some specific actions or target that has to be achieved by 2030. Personally speaking, no countries will be basically the important countries will not be able to achieve that. So if this increases, then obligation will be there for India as well. The long-term strategy will have to reveal the estimated low carbon pathway, a deal to attain the net zero status of India by 2070. The long-term strategy are unlikely to meet the midway targets, and even India has backed some of the other countries bloc to introduce the proposals, that is by the developed nations, to focus on mitigations work program with the top 20 emitters country of the greenhouse gases. Now, countries की अगर बात करें जिनकी कार्बन फुटप्रिंट सबसे ज़्यादा है, and if we talk about the per capita CO2 emissions in the world largest economy, this is for the 2016 data. United States is the country that has the highest emissions, followed by Canada, South Korea, Russia, Japan, Germany, China, United Kingdom, Italy, France, Brazil, and India. India is not that contributor compared to many other countries. Now, criticism over coal based पावर, इंडिया को इस चीज़ के लिए क्रिटिसाइज की जाती है जिस तरह से कंजम्पशन है इंडिया में कोल की वो काफ़ी हाई है. सो इंडिया हैड बीन कंस्टेंटली क्रिटिसाइज नॉट डूइंग इनफ टू करेल द रिलायंस ऑन coal power. Nearly 55% of energy requirement come directly from the coal-based power, even after a massive expansion of renewable sector in our country. India has maintained that in keeping with the fast-growing energy requirement, it will continue to be dependent on coal as a major source of power, generation of 3 to 4 decades, and even the coal-fired power plant are unlikely to come up. At the Glasgow Climate Conference last year, India, with the help of some other countries, was successful in getting a reference to quick phase out the coal, and it will be phasing down. Definitely, India is working in the direction, but considering the fact and even the paucity of the resources and even the length and breadth of the country, the implementation will take a due course of time. Now, India's efforts for the net zero emissions की अगर बात करें, इंडिया में net zero emissions की जो टारगेट है 2070 तक रखी गई है, लेकिन रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की जो टारगेट है दैट हैज स्टीटली बिकम मोर एम्बिशियस फ्रॉम 175 गीगावाट ऑफ 2022 आगे बढ़ा करके इसे 450 गीगावाट की गई है बाय 2030, राइट. एंड इन द यूएन समिट दिस इज नाउ 500 गीगावाट बाय 2030 दैट वाज अनाउंस्ड इन द COP26. So the Prime Minister has made a revision and 50 gigawatt has been increased. India has announced a target of 50% installed power generation capacity from the non-fossil fuel sources by 2030, raising the existing target of 40%. Earlier it was 40%, now the changes has been made to 50%. Right? India has also announced an hydrogen energy missions for green and grey hydrogen, and in efficient way, the market-based scheme of the perform, achieve and trade, जिसे PAT भी कहते हैं, has to avoided 92 million ton of CO2 equivalent emissions during the first and second phase cycles. Now, India's green roadmap की अगर बात करें, what was the target? 500 gigawatt basically installed electricity capacity from the non-fossil sources. Present में क्या status है? Solar power की अगर बात करें, this is 51 gigawatt. This is very important, right? Even you can use this in the mains examination. Make sure you take a note of this. जो present में solar की बात करें, 51% है. 51 gigawatt, sorry, this is gigawatt. 40 gigawatt from the wind, 11 gigawatt from bio power, 5 gigawatt from small hydropower, and 46 gigawatt from large hydropower. The total is 156. And what is there in the pipeline? आगे की roadmap क्या है? 73 gigawatt under implementation and 21 gigawatt under the various stage of bidding. So this is the authentic sources from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Now moving to the other news, that is panel concern over the population criteria for new acclaim school. Something important for General Studies paper 2 under the subtopic welfare schemes for the vulnerable section of the population by the center and the state government. So earlier this year, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on the Social Justice and Empowerment has recommended that there should be an immediate review for the criteria or creation, pointing to significant difficulties in acquiring the land in several districts, especially for the forested hill areas. For continuous 15-acre plot is hard to find. तो एकलव्य स्कूल इस्टेब्लिश करने के लिए 15 एकड़ ऑफ लैंड की क्राइटेरिया रखी गई है, और जो पार्लियामेंट्री स्टैंडिंग कमेटी उन्होंने स्पेसिफिकली कहा है कि इसकी लैंड एक्विजिशन में काफ़ी ज़्यादा प्रॉब्लम आ सकती है. द पैनल नोटेड दैट द क्रिएशंस वुड आल्सो बी डिप्राइव्ड द स्कैटर्ड एसटी पॉपुलेशन फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ द एकलव्य स्कूल. अगर ये क्राइटेरिया मीट नहीं होती है तो स्कूल की एस्टैब्लिशमेंट नहीं होगी, विच इज अगेन डेट्रीमेंटल फॉर द पॉपुलेशन रिसाइडिंग एट द एरिया. Now, what is the main criticism? The Tribal Affairs Ministry intended to go ahead with its plan to build the new Eklave Model Residential School, the 15 acre of the land in the all sub-districts, having the scheduled tribe communities for more than 20,000 people. जिस जगह पे 20,000 से ऊपर की population है वहाँ पे एक एकलव्य स्कूल बनाने की बात की है, and who will make up at least 50% of the total population, despite the parliamentary panel saying the creation is impractical because acquiring the land is other process that has to be done, and this will take the due process of time, which will definitely impact the quality of education, and enrollment process will also be impacted. ट्राइबल अफेयर्स मिनिस्ट्री की क्या स्टैंड है इस कंसर्न को लेकर के? हाउएवर द ट्राइबल अफेयर्स मिनिस्ट्री इज पब्लिशिंग द हेड विद ऑफिशियल्स इन द National Education Society for the Tribal Students saying that there's no process yet to even review the guidelines suggested by the standing committee. As a Tribal Affairs Secretary, there is a creations where decided to finalize the cabinet intended to go with it. And however, as per the data presented, the government to the standing committee at the end of 2021 and 22 has said that a total sanctions of 232 Eklavya Model Residential School, that is EMRS, is yet to begin with the constructions. Now, कुछ senior officials जो हैं National Education Society for Tribal Students के उन्होंने बताया that most of the places of identifying the new Eklavya residential model, there is no land available inside the village or block. तो 15 एकड़ की जो criteria है वो पूरी करना काफ़ी मुश्किल होगी. So we have go to the outskirts, and where is the cases whether identifying turning out of the forested land where the permission no longer is useful. Even environmental clearances is required, and if the school is too far, the student will not able to reach out. तो ये सारी problems है, criticism है जिसे ध्यान रखने की जरूरत है. Now moving to the editorial of the day, behind the smoke screen around the private climate finance, something important for General Studies paper 2, under the subtopic government policies and intervention for the development of various sectors and issue rising from a design and implementation. Also important for General Studies paper 2, where bilateral regional grouping and agreement are concerned. So what I'll be discussing in this editorial, so first talking about the theme of this editorial. The editorial focuses upon the climate finance. We'll look into the background, after which solutions to the climate changes, unachieved goals kya hai, challenges for the low income countries, and the way forward. Now, over the last few years, the developed countries have insisted upon 2 points of the climate issues. दो ऐसे important issues हैं जिनको काफ़ी ज़्यादा इंसिस्ट की गई है, उन पर ध्यान देने की बात की गई है. फर्स्ट, मेनली दैट द कमिटमेंट ऑफ द डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज to reach a target of 100 billion climate finance has not been yet met, right, for the developed countries. So this amount, this corpus was to help and aid the developing countries, and this promise has not been met. Secondly, they view to mobilize the private finance as a critical component of climate finance. The US Special Presidential Envoy for the Climate Change, Mr. John Kerry, and the current US Special Envoy on the Climate Action and Finance are leading the proponents for the view. Now, बात करें solutions क्या है, किस तरह के solutions में measure लेने की ज़रूरत है. On the occasions, the US Special Representative for the President Envoy on the Climate Change has said that the private sector can find the solutions to climate change. So he's basically calling for a triple P model, which is helping not only for India but across the globe, and funding by trillions needed to have a global transitions to have a clean energy. Now, the current UN Special Envoy for the Climate and Finance has called for turning billion into the public capital into trillion in the private capital by scaling blending finance, जहाँ पे catalyzing की जाएगी stand alone private investment के साथ, उसके private investment की जो capital inflows हैं उनको utilize करने की बात की गई है, and even building the new markets. Now, for developed countries to shape the policies based on the optimistic view, and it's clearly challenging. How should developed countries to respond to this? We'll look into that part. Now, कुछ unachieved targets हैं जिसे achieve करने की ज़रूरत है. Now, shortly before the ongoing 27th conference of the parties, that is COP, which is there, the United Nations Framework for Climate Change, which began in Egypt, 6 नवंबर को ये मीटिंग स्टार्ट हुई है. UNFCCC ने स्टैंडिंग कमिटीज ऑन फाइनेंस से कहा दैट अ रिपोर्ट ऑन प्रोग्रेस शुड बी मेड for the developed countries और कितनी target achieve हुई है with regards to the 100 billion per year. So this was the climate finance which was supposed to be there from the developed countries to the developing countries. Now, talking about the report of two things clear, like 100 billion goals has not been achieved in 2020. The efforts to mobilize the private finance by the developed countries has to meet with the comprehensive failure. Now, OECD की report है, they have claimed that the developed countries have mobilized 83.3 billion on the climate finance in 2020. The latest Oxfam report challenging this figure with claims to have actually value of OECD claim, and the climate assistance for 83 billion only is around 21, that is 22.4 billion. तो ये value अभी तक इतनी ही हो पाई है. And even the OECD reports have also been criticizing for the lack of transparency in the information on mobilizing the private finance. ना कुछ challenges की अगर बात करें जो developed country के पास है, even for the low income countries, following the decimal failure of the 100 million goals, the developed countries are pushing target to achieve it by 2025. Actual target 2020 की थी, but extension दी गई है 5 year की. We have seen the COVID-19 pandemic globally, which has also impacted the total collections. Now the developing countries will have a long term instead have a significant proportions of their climate finance. That should be the public fund as private finance, not address the need and priority, especially related to adaptations. Climate finance already remained a skewed towards mitigations and flow, towards a bankable project with a clear revenue streams. Adaptations is likely to offer commercially profitable opportunities for the private finances. Now, if you look into the way forward and conclusion of this editorial, so first and foremost is addressing the climate finance. This is the most urgent topic that need to be there by the developing countries, and that cannot be left out in the mercy of false promises, which like trillions of US dollars is something that has to be mobilized from the private climate finance. Now, many activities indeed is required for finances and leading to perhaps no direct mobilizing potentials. The SFC report has highlighted the concluding of the mobilizations and even the private finance for achieving the 100 billion goals that should not come with the expenses of involving the trade addressing the need for the developing countries. So developing countries are chasing the target and even they are requesting the developed countries to even contribute what was actually promised. Now the grant-based concessional international public climate finance will continue to play a key role in addressing the need and priority for the developed countries, especially in the growing challenges due to extreme weather, food and energy crisis. So these are some of the evidential facts that the nation is ongoing. Many of the developed countries are ongoing with the crisis of extreme weather, food and energy crisis. Moving to the MCQ questions of the day, before I proceed, just to tell you the answers of yesterday's questions. For first question, the correct option is C. For second question, the correct option is C again. Today's MCQ for practice. आपको बताना है the direct participation of retail investors in the bidding process will enable through the core banking solution of the Reserve Bank of India by which of the platform? E-Investor, E-Kuber, E-Trading or E-Biswas. So do check it out for the correct option. Now the second question of the day, that is Nai Roshni is a scheme for leadership development is being implemented by the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Social Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice and Ministry of Minority Affairs. So do check it out for the correct option. This type of questions might be relevant for the upcoming prelims examination. This was all about for the daily news and editorial analysis followed by the MCQ questions. If you have any other concern, you can let me know. I'll be more than happy to assist you. For time being, I'm signing off. Thank you so much for watching this video.